Albert Camus died in a car crash on January 4th, 1960. He was 46 years old. In the wreckage, police found the unused train ticket in his coat pocket. He had planned to take the train. His publisher convinced him to ride instead. The absurdity was not lost on anyone who knew his work. Here was a man who spent his entire life arguing that the universe does not care about your plans, your dreams, or your logic. Killed by pure chance on a sunny afternoon in France. If you are scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning, paralyzed by the feeling that nothing you do actually matters, that your job is pointless, your relationships are fragile, and the world is falling apart, then Camus already knew what you were feeling. He called it the absurd. And unlike most philosophers who discovered life was meaningless and either killed themselves or invented a comforting story, Camus did something different. He said the meaninglessness was the point, and that once you accept it, you become free. Albert Camus was a French-Algerian philosopher, novelist, and journalist who believed that life has no inherent meaning, that suffering is guaranteed. He argued that the only real question is whether one should choose to end their life or continue living. His answer was simple and radical. You keep going, not because there is a reason to, but because there is not. This is the philosophy of absurdism, and it emerged from one of the darkest periods in human history. Camus wrote his most famous works during World War II, during the Nazi occupation of France, while working for the French resistance, and witnessed humanity's capacity for destruction in the name of ideologies that promised meaning and purpose. He saw what happens when people try to escape the absurd by creating totalizing systems, whether religious, political, or philosophical. They build death camps. They justify murder. They sacrifice human beings for abstract ideas. So Camus proposed a third option between nihilism and false hope. Accept that life is meaningless and then live anyway. With passion, with rebellion, with solidarity. By the end of this, you will understand why he thought the struggle itself is enough. Why he believed that imagining Sisyphus happy was not a joke, but a solution. And why his ideas might be the only honest response to a world that keeps promising you meaning and delivering chaos. Camus was born in 1913 in Algeria, which was then a French colony. His father died in World War I when Camus was less than a year old. His mother was partially deaf and illiterate. They lived in a 2-room apartment in the working-class Arab quarter of Algiers with almost no money. Camus grew up in silence and poverty. His mother could not read to him. She barely spoke. He later wrote that her silence taught him more than any book. It taught him that the world does not explain itself, that suffering does not come with a lesson, that life simply happens to you and you have to decide what to do with it. When he was 17, Camus was diagnosed with tuberculosis. In the 1930s, this was a death sentence. He was bedridden for months. He had to quit the football team, which he loved. He had to abandon his dreams of becoming a teacher because the French education system did not allow people with tuberculosis to work with children. The disease came back throughout his life. It marked him. He knew every single day that he was going to die. Not abstractly, not someday, but soon, and that knowledge changed everything. Most people live as if they have infinite time. Camus did not have that luxury. He had to figure out what mattered right now, because tomorrow was not guaranteed. This is where the absurd was born, not in a library, not in a university, but in a hospital bed in Algeria, where a young man with no money and no future stared at the ceiling and realized that the universe had no explanation for why he was suffering. No reason, no plan, just indifferent silence. And that silence, Camus decided, was the truth. Everything else was a lie we tell ourselves to avoid facing it. In 1942, Camus published a short philosophical essay called The Myth of Sisyphus. The question it opens with is simple and horrifying. There is only one really serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. Everything else is secondary. He was not being dramatic, he meant it. If life has no inherent meaning, if we are all going to die, if suffering is random and unavoidable, then why not just end it now? Why go through the motions? Camus called this feeling the absurd. The absurd is the conflict between the human need for meaning and the silent, indifferent universe that refuses to provide it. You want your life to matter, you want your suffering to mean something, you want justice, logic, coherence. But the universe does not care, it does not answer, it does not even acknowledge the question. You are a meaning-making machine trapped in a world that has no meaning. That is the absurd, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Most people, Camus said, run from this realization. They distract themselves with work, pleasure, ambition, religion, politics, anything to avoid the silence. They build stories. They convince themselves that their job matters, that their nation is special, that God has a plan, that history is going somewhere. And these stories work for a while, until they do not. Until you are lying awake at 3 in the morning and the story collapses and you are left with the raw fact of existence. No plot, no meaning, just you alone in a universe that will forget you the moment you are gone. This is the modern condition. You feel it every time you open social media and see 1,000 tragedies you can do nothing about. Every time you work a job that feels pointless. Every time you try to care about something and realize that in 100 years, none of it will matter. Camus was writing in 1940, too, but he was describing 2025. So what do? Camus rejected 2 easy answers. The first is suicide. If life is meaningless, why not just quit? His answer was simple. Suicide is an admission of defeat. It is a surrender to the absurd. It says, I cannot live without meaning, so I will not live at all. But that is exactly the trap. The absurd does not require meaning. The absurd requires you to live without it. Suicide solves nothing. It just ends the game before you have played it. The second easy answer is what Camus called philosophical suicide. This is when you invent a meaning to make the absurd go away. You join a religion. You adopt an ideology. You convince yourself that everything happens for a reason, that suffering builds character, that God is testing you, that history is progressing toward justice. Camus called this cowardice, not because religion or hope is bad, but because it is a refusal to face the truth. It is a way of lying to yourself, so you do not have to live with attention. Camus proposed a third option: accept the absurd, stare directly at the meaninglessness of existence and refuse to look away. And then, in full knowledge that nothing matters, choose to live anyway. Live fully, live passionately, live in rebellion against the silence. This is what he called absurd freedom. You are free precisely because nothing matters. You are not bound by destiny, divine plans, or historical inevitability. You are not obligated to suffer nobly or to redeem your pain with a lesson. You are simply here, and that means you get to decide what to do with the time you have, not because it will lead somewhere, but because it will not. This is where Sisyphus comes in. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus was a king who cheated death twice. As punishment, the gods condemned him to roll a boulder up a mountain for eternity. Every time he reached the top, the boulder rolled back down. No progress, no escape, no meaning, just endless, pointless labor. Most people read this story as a tragedy. Camus read it as a blueprint. He ends his essay with one of the most famous lines in philosophy. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because Sisyphus is conscious. He knows the boulder will roll back down. He knows his labor is futile. And yet he keeps going, not because he is deluded, but because he has accepted the absurd and chosen to rebel against it. The act of pushing the boulder is his freedom. The struggle itself is the point. Camus is saying this. Your life is the boulder. You will work, love, suffer, and die. Nothing you do will last. The universe will not remember you. And that is fine, because the meaning is not in the outcome. The meaning is in the act of living itself, in choosing every single day to push the boulder, even though you know it will roll back down. That is absurd heroism. That is freedom. Now let us talk about what this cost him. Camus was not writing theory in a comfortable office. He was living it. During World War II, he joined the French resistance and edited an underground newspaper called Combat. He risked his life printing anti-Nazi propaganda. He watched friends disappear into camps. He saw humans reduced to numbers. And through all of it, He refused to adopt the revolutionary ideologies that promised to fix everything. He argued with the communists. He argued with the existentialists. He argued with Jean-Paul Sartre, his former friend, who believed that history had a direction and that violence could be justified in the name of progress. Camus said no. There is no future utopia that justifies murdering people today. There is no historical inevitability. There is only this moment and the human beings in front of you, and the choice to treat them with dignity or not. This made him enemies. The left called him a reactionary. The right called him a traitor. Existentialists mocked him. Sartre broke with him publicly in 1952, calling him naive and bourgeois. Camus was devastated. He fell into depression, he drank heavily, he had affairs, he struggled to write. His tuberculosis flared up again. He felt like a failure, and yet he kept writing. In 1956, he published The Fall, a dark, confessional novel about guilt, hypocrisy, and self-deception. In 1957, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature at the age of 43. In his acceptance speech, he said something that defined his entire philosophy. I continue to believe that this world has no ultimate meaning, but I know that something in it has meaning, and that is man, because he is the only creature to insist on having one. 3 years later, he was dead, killed by the very randomness he spent his life describing. The absurd had the last word. Or did it, because here we are 65 years later, still reading him, still thinking about him, still trying to figure out how to live in a world that will not give us answers. That is the strange immortality of Camus. Not in monuments or institutions, but in the minds of people who are struggling with the same question he did. Is life worth living if it means nothing? And his answer still echoes, yes, not despite the meaninglessness, but because of it. So what does this mean for you? How do you actually live with the absurd in 2025? First, stop looking for the one thing that will make your life make sense. There is no dream job that will complete you, no relationship that will fix you, no achievement that will prove you matter. If you are waiting for your life to start once you get the promotion, the partner, the house, the validation, you are running from the absurd. You are outsourcing your meaning to something outside yourself. And when it does not deliver, you will crash. Camus would say, stop waiting. Your life is happening right now. This moment, this breath, this choice, that is it. That is all you get. The meaning is not in the destination. It is in the decision to show up. Second, embrace the rebellion. You are going to suffer. You are going to fail. You are going to lose people you love. The universe will not compensate you for this. It will not balance the scales. So stop asking it to. Stop waiting for karma. Stop believing that good things happen to good people. Instead, rebel, choose to create beauty, connection, and joy anyway. Not because it will be rewarded, but because it is the one thing the absurd cannot take from you. The act of creating meaning in a meaningless world is the ultimate rebellion. It is the boulder, and you get to decide whether you push it with resentment or with defiance. Third, practice absurd solidarity. Camus believed that once you accept the absurd, you realize that everyone else is in the same position. We are all rolling boulders. We are all going to die. We are all terrified and confused, and that shared condition is the foundation of ethics. You do not need God or ideology to tell you not to harm others. You just need to recognize that their suffering is as real and as meaningless as yours. And that is enough. So the experiment is this. For 1 week, try living as if nothing you do will matter in 100 years. And then notice what you still choose to do. What do you care about when the pressure to be productive is gone? Who do you want to spend time with when there is no future payoff? What do you create when no one is watching? Those answers are your values, not the ones you inherited, not the ones Instagram told you to have. The ones that survive the absurd, that is your boulder, and you get to decide if you push it with joy. Camus did not solve the problem of existence. He did not make life less painful or death less real, but he did something harder. He looked directly at the void and refused to blink. He said, "This is it. There is no sequel, no reset, no cosmic referee. Just you, the boulder, and the choice to keep going." And somehow, that honesty is more comforting than any promise of heaven or progress or meaning. Because it is true, The world is absurd, life is short, suffering is real, and none of it has to stop you. That is the dangerous idea Camus left behind. Not that life is meaningless, but that meaninglessness is not a problem to solve. It is a condition to accept, and once you accept it, you are free. Free from the need to justify your existence. Free from the fear of failure. Free from the tyranny of purpose. You do not need a reason to live. You just need the courage to do it anyway. The man who said life is meaningless refused to quit, not because he found a reason, but because he realized he did not need one. The struggle itself was enough. And if you can believe that, even for a moment, you have understood something most people spend their entire lives running from. You have touched the absurd, and it did not destroy you. It set you free.